These documents are an official notice concerning the property at this address. Please review them immediately.
Time's up, the landlord sneered, waving eviction papers as movers climbed the porch steps. Rain slicked the pavement. Phones rose from every corner, and Eleanor clutched the brass key to her chest like a lifeline. Walter braced his cane, refusing to step aside. Then a horn split the silence. A black sedan stopped hard at the curb. Out stepped a woman in a navy suit, documents flashing. Behind her, a military jeep rolled in, a uniformed figure emerging, and then an SUV, cameras following. The crowd gasped, whispers swirling. Who were they? And why did the landlord suddenly pale? The porch light flickered once as the children formed a wall around their parents. What happened next would turn the whole block upside down. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now, let's begin. Leave from this house. Walter's laugh came out thin and tired, the kind that carried dust. He steadied the mug, a small tremor in his hand, and set it beside Eleanor's pillbox. She adjusted her cardigan at the shoulder, blinked twice to clear the morning blur, and pulled a worn ribbon from her pocket. At the end of that ribbon hung a brass house key, smooth as river stone. She pressed it to her palm like a prayer. The little bungalow smelled of lemon oil and old books. Sunlight slid across framed photos on the mantel, catching one in particular. 3 pale kids with gap smiles standing between a younger Walter and Eleanor. Adoption day. The memory still had heat. Eleanor exhaled slow. "We build a life here," she whispered. "Every wall remembers." A car crept past the window, slow enough to be rude. Victor Halloway again. He had a habit of circling, tapping notes on his phone, pretending to check gutters or count cracks in the driveway. The neighbors pretended not to watch, but curtains twitched. "He's back," came a soft comment from the sidewalk. "He wants that lot." Another voice lower. "Old folks won't last the winter anyway." The words hung like cold breath. Walter eased onto the porch swing. The chain squeaked. He rubbed a scuff on his shoe, failed to buff it out. Tried again. Small stubbornness across the hedges. Victor lifted a camera to eye level. "Morning," he called too bright. "Lease terms are clear. Market's changed. So have your rights." He smiled without showing teeth. "Rights don't change with prices," Eleanor said. She stood, spine straightening like a line drawn by hand, and tightened the ribbon around the key. Her voice stayed gentle, but there was grit under it. "You served notice. We appealed. You know that." Victor's clipboard clicked. "Appeals expire, deadlines pass." He stepped closer, polished shoes, finding the one cracked tile on the step. He made a face as if the house itself offended him. "I'll be back with movers." Soon, curiosity had a way of growing legs. By noon, the block had a hum. Someone filmed appalling paint and called it an eyesore. Someone else mentioned a developer who loved corner lots. A teenager on a bike this slow loop and muttered, "This going to go viral if it gets ugly." Inside, Eleanor traced the photo's glass with a fingertip. She remembered the first night the kids slept here, how the house settled and sighed as if learning their names. Walter lowered himself to the floor to reach a fallen letter, winced, breathed through it. "We are not leaving," he said, voice low, "not while I can stand." Eleanor nodded, eyes on the brass key. The porch light clicked on early, catching dust in the air like tiny galaxies. Outside, Victor typed, glanced up, and took one last picture. He walked away whistling a tune that did not fit the street. The house listened, the ribbon warmed in Eleanor's hand. And somewhere far from this quiet block, 3 phones buzzed in 3 busy lives that had once begun on this very porch. The first knock came in a drizzle that smelled like wet copper. Victor did not wait for an answer. He slid a thick envelope through the mail slot and snapped a photo of it on the rug. Eleanor bent to pick it up, paused to steady her breath, then eased the flap open with her nail. Words stacked like a thread. "Final notice, 30 days." Walter read twice, lips moving. He tucked the letter under a cookbook, as if paper could hide inside flour and butter. "Appeal is still pending," he said, voice thin. He reached for Eleanor's hand, rubbed the soft place between teeth. Hum and wrist, a habit learned during hospital nights. The block had ears. 30 days, someone whispered by the hedge. He will flip the house by summer. Another voice sharp with caffeine. City does not care. Watch. They tried small defenses. Walter tightened the portrayal. Eleanor label boxes that were not for packing but for proof. Sunday school crafts. The adoption decree. A birthday card with 3 messy signatures and a chocolate thumbprint. The brass key rested on her ribbon warm from her palm. Every hour she checked it like a pulse. Victor accelerated. Certified letters. A contractor measuring windows at noon. A notice stapled to the maple tree. Red stamp bleeding through in the rain. He loved the crowd. He waved to phones. Just following the law, he said loud enough for the sidewalk. They're months behind. Cameras panned to the ceiling, not the receipts in Walter's folder. A week later, the sheriff's postcard arrived. Possession date set. Eleanor read it in the doorway. Her voice caught on the date, then steadied. "We hold," she said. She smoothed her cardigan, blinked away grit, and set the card face down. Night dragged, pipes clicked, a siren sighed 2 streets over. Walter lay awake, listening to Eleanor breathe, counting the gap between each inhale and the next. He thought about the first crib he built in the living room, how the house seemed to lean closer to hear a newborn sound. He mouthed their names into the dark. A quiet roll call. Morning gave no mercy. A move. Ing truck prowled the corner like a shark. The driver idled, tapping the wheel. Neighbors collected in little clumps, arms folded, coffee cooling. "You recording?" someone asked. Always came the reply. A teen whispered, "If they drag them out, tag me." Victor arrived with a folder and a smile that did not reach his eyes. The sheriff followed, had low expression blank. Eleanor stood on the porch with the brass key pressed flat against her lifeline. Walter adjusted his collar. "Failed? Tried again." "Time," Victor said. He gestured to the steps. "Cooperate in this day civil." Walter planted his cane on the top stair. "This home is paid on time. Your math is a trick." He lifted a paper. Receipts. He held them out. The sheriff glanced, blinked slow, looked away. Procedure was a tide. Victor motioned. 2 movers climbed the steps. Boots thudded. Cameras rose like a small forest. The air tasted like metal. Eleanor opened her palm. The key gleamed and then hid as her fingers closed. She took one breath, then another. "We are not alone," she said quietly, not sure if she met each other or something bigger. The movers reached the doorway. A horn sounded at the corner, low and steady. Heads turned. The truck driver straightened in his seat. A door slammed somewhere nearby, quick and sure, and the crowd shifted toward the sound. The horn echoed down the street, long and deliberate, cutting through the nervous hum of bystanders. Phones pivoted toward the corner just as a sleek black sedan glid. Ed into view, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Its headlights swept across the gathered faces before the car eased to a stop directly in front of the Brooks home. The back door opened and out stepped Sarah, tall, steady, her navy suit still sharp despite the rain. She adjusted the strap of her briefcase, blinked once against the drizzle, and smoothed her blazer sleeve with practiced precision. The crowd leaned forward. Someone whispered, "That's a lawyer." Another voice added, "She looks expensive." Sarah didn't look at them. Her eyes locked on her parents standing on the porch. Eleanor's fingers curled tight around the brass key. Walter's cane braced firm against the top step. She drew in a breath, held it for a beat, and crossed the lawn with deliberate calm. The sheriff half turned, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Hold the eviction," Sarah said, voice clear enough for the block to hear. She pulled papers from her case, pages shielded in plastic sleeves, stamped with the bold red of injunction. "Filed this morning. You can't move them. Not today. Not tomorrow." She handed the packet to the sheriff with a faint smile that didn't quite reach her lips. Victor's smirk faltered. "This is harassment stalling tactics," he barked, though his voice cracked. At the end, he dabbed his forehead with a folded handkerchief, eyes darting toward the growing crowd. Before he could gather himself, another sound cut in, deep, mechanical, steady. Heads turned as a green military jeep rolled into the block, its tires crunching over puddles. Neighbors edged back instinctively from the driver's side, stepped David, his posture rigid, shoulders squared beneath his officer's uniform. The metals pinned to his chest caught the dull light, gleaming sharp. He paused, adjusted his belt, then walked forward, boots clicking against the pavement. His gaze swept over Victor, then the movers, then the sheriff. He spoke quietly, but his voice carried. Evicting seniors under fraudulent grounds qualifies as elder abuse. It's not only a civil matter, it's criminal. You really want this on record. The sheriff shifted uneasily. The movers lowered their boxes to the ground, avoiding eye contact. Gossip rippled. That's their son, military. Oh, this just changed, Victor stammered. You can't just show up in costume. But his words cut short as a third vehicle arrived. This time a glossy black SUV that pulled attention like gravity. Its tinted windows reflected the crowd until the door opened and Michael stepped out. Phone already to his ear. He wore no uniform, no suit, just dark jeans, a tailored coat, and confidence that turned heads. Behind him, two men with cameras followed, their equipment unmistakable. Press, someone murmured, tugging at a friend's sleeve. He brought press. Michael hung up his call, smirked faintly, and gestured toward the cameras. Funny thing about markets, he said, his voice smooth. Developers love publicity until it looks like bullying old folks. Guess who's trend? Ding right now? He pulled a folded document from his coat, crisp and clean. And just so we're clear, Victor, I closed on the note to this property yesterday. Mortgage is mine, which means technically. He tilted his head, eyebrow raised. You're trespassing. Gasps tore through the crowd. Phones tilted higher, capturing every blink, every twitch. Victor's handkerchief slipped to the ground. He bent to grab it, fumbled, cursed under his breath. On the porch, Eleanor exhaled a sound between a sob and a laugh. She pressed the brass key flat to her chest, the ribbon trembling. Walter blinked hard, wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand, and leaned heavier on his cane. The street had shifted. What began as eviction now pulsed with spectacle. Neighbors whispered, "Are you seeing this?" Someone muttered. "They raised those kids, right?" The teen on his bike whispered into his phone, "This is going viral for real." Victor opened his mouth to argue, but no sound came. The children stood side by side now, lawyer, soldier, entrepreneur, forming a wall in front of their parents. Camera zoomed. The brass key in Eleanor's hand gleamed like a signal. The storm had gathered, and Victor for the first time looked small against it. The streak had gone quiet except for the hiss of drizzle against pavement. Every phone stayed lifted, every breath suspended as Victor tried to recover his footing. He tugged at his collar, adjusted his tie, and forced a grin that trembled at the edges. You think if A.W. Theatrics changed the law? His voice strained higher than usual. He slapped the eviction folder against his palm, the sound sharp and hollow. They're behind their squatters. This house is mine, and no parlor tricks will. Behind. Sarah's words cut through him like glass. She stepped forward, heels clicking against the wet wood of the porch. She opened a folder from her briefcase with steady fingers and pulled out a thick stack of receipts. Mortgage paid, utilities cleared, taxes filed. She handed the stack to the sheriff, her nails tapping once against the top page for emphasis. This is a neglect. It's fraud. His fraud. The sheriff adjusted his hat, brows knitted. He scanned the documents, lips moving over figures, then glanced at Victor, his jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Victor's face flushed red. They're old. They won't fight. This is watch your tone. David's voice landed heavy, almost physical. He stepped forward, boots splashing through a shallow puddle. He adjusted his belt, hand brushing the insignia on his chest, and locked his stare on Victor. Elder intimidation is a chargeable offense. What you're doing isn't just eviction, it's criminal coercion. You can argue with them. He tilted his head toward his parents, then back. But you'll have to answer to me. A ripple ran through the crowd, someone whispered. That's military brass, real deal. Another voice. He's finished. Victor opened his mouth again. But Michael was already stepping in, a faint smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. He held up a clean white envelope, edges sealed. "And in case you missed my brother and sister's point, I'll make mine simple." He pulled the document halfway free, the embossed seal catching the camera light. "I own this property now. Mortgage, title, note, paid in full." He let the words sit, let them soak into the gathering silence. "You're no landlord here, Victor. You're loitering." Gasps broke across the street like a wave. A woman clapped her hand to her mouth. The teen on his bike nearly dropped his phone. Someone laughed, a short, nervous bark. "Leadering," they repeated, shaking their head. Victor staggered back a step, his folders slipping from his grip, papers fanned across the wet sidewalk and bleeding. He bent to grab them, but his hand shook. When he looked up again, his smile had vanished. Eleanor stepped forward slowly, leaning on Walter's arm. She raised the brass key, the ribbon dangling, and held it up like a small glowing torch. Her voice, though quiet, carried down the block. "This key has opened that door for 40 years. No one, not threats, not money, not greed, will take it from us." The crowd erupted, cheers, claps, murmurs. Phones tilted higher, capturing Eleanor's trembling hand, Walter's steady arm, and the three children standing like a shield before them. The drizzle glittered under porch light, falling soft but relentless. Victor tried one last time, voice raw. "This isn't over. It is." Sarah's interruption was surgical. She nodded to the sheriff, who had lowered his clipboard and closed the eviction file with deliberate finality, effective immediately. Victor's mouth opened, but no words came. The cameras caught every twitch, every blink, every crack in his mask. He turned sharply, almost tripping on the step, and stormed toward his car. The crowd parted just enough to let him through, their whispers following him like a swarm. As his tail lights disappeared, Michael slid his phone back into his pocket. David exhaled through his nose, and Sarah closed her case with a snap. They turned together. Not to the crowd, not to the sheriff, but to Eleanor and Walter. The porch light flickered once, then steadied, and in that glow the Brookes were no longer alone. Their children had turned a nightmare into a reckoning. The power had shifted. The landlord was nothing but a ghost walking away. The rain eased into a mist, softening the edges of the crowd. Phones were still raised, recording, but now the air carried a different sound. Claps, whistles, even a few voices calling out the Brookes' name. The eviction that was supposed to humiliate them had flipped into something else entirely, a spectacle of loyalty. Eleanor lowered the brass key into her palm and kissed it lightly. Her lips trembling, she turned it in her fingers until the ribbon brushed her cheek. Walter steadied her with one hand on her back, blinking hard behind thick glasses. The swing on the porch creaked faintly in the wind, the same swing where the Y had once cradled babies who grew into the very people now guarding them. Sarah adjusted her blazer, damp at the shoulders. She gave her mother a half smile, something small and private, then lifted her chin at the cameras. Fraud exposed, case dismissed, eviction blocked. Her voice carried with calm authority, but her hand reached back, squeezing Eleanor's fingers for reassurance. David unbuttoned the top clasp of his uniform jacket and exhaled, finally letting his posture ease. He glanced over at his father, gave a single nod. "He won't be back," he said, "not with charges pending." His tone was matter-of-fact, but there was a quiet fury under it, the kind that came from seeing his parents cornered. Michael, meanwhile, pulled the deed from his pocket and placed it into Walter's hands. "It's yours," he said softly, though the cameras tried to catch every word. "No mortgage, no loopholes, no one touches it again." Walter's fingers trembled over the document, tracing the embossed seal. "You bought this for us." His voice cracked, rasping from disbelief. Michael shrugged, though his eyes shone. "For family, you gave us a home when no one else would. We're just returning the favor." The crowd stirred neighbors, once skeptical, now nodding, whispering things like, "Raise them right and blood don't matter." "Look at that loyalty." A boy on a bike muttered into his phone. Whole street just witnessed history. The sheriff tipped his hat, face set in a mix of shame and relief, then turned away, leaving Victor's abandoned papers bleeding ink into the wet pavement. Eleanor pressed the key into Walter's hand, closing his fingers around it. "We started with this key," she whispered, "and it ends with us keeping it." Her eyes glistened, her chest rising in sharp little breaths. The children drew closer, forming a small circle at the foot of the porch. Neighbors watched as the Brooks family stood together, shoulder to shoulder, as if welded by something deeper than blood. The porch light glowed steady now, painting their faces gold against the dark street. Somewhere someone whispered, "That'll be on the news tonight." Another voice replied, "Should be. People need to see this." Eleanor leaned into Walter's shoulder, her cardigan damp, her ribbon wet but unbroken. "We're safe," she said. The brass key caught one last glimmer of light, shining not just as a lock tool, but as a symbol of home, of memory, of a love that had raised children strong enough to shield them. And with that the crowd began to thin, whispers trailing down the block. The Brooks stood still together, as if letting the moment settle into the very walls of the house. For the first time in months, they breathed easy. The landlord had wanted them erased. Instead, the story had been written, etched into the neighborhood. The cameras and the hearts of everyone watching. The home was theirs. The fight was over and legacy at last was secure. If this story gripped you, imagine how many more untold battles like this are happening right now. Don't let stories of loyalty, justice, and unexpected power go unseen. Hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and share this video so more people can witness how the tables turn when family and truth step in.